What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode, we're starting seeds. That's right, the time has finally come for us to start our 2022 gardening season. So we're gonna be starting a bunch of seeds today. A lot of you like to kind of follow along, kind of see what we're planting and when we're planting it. So it kind of gives you a rough guide of when you should be starting your garden. But I just thought it'd be kind of fun to bring you guys along. We do this every single year, but I'm not just going to talk about just the varieties that I'm starting. A lot of you like to know those things, but a lot of you also like to know other tips and tricks to seed starting. And I know we've added a lot of new people to the channel, so we're gonna be doing that as well, just kind of sprinkling in some tips and tricks along the way. So with that being said, let's get on to today's video because we've got a lot to start. So the first thing that I'm doing right here is I'm just dibbling my seed trays. I'm using the back of a marker just to dibble them. I've pre-moistened the seed starting mix. The seed starting mix is basically just a sifted potting mix. Always talk about that. We sift it down with a 1/4 inch mesh. That takes out all the really big chunks that might kind of clutter things up a little bit. And so it makes it a little finer, gives it a little more surface area, helps it to hold on to moisture a little better, but also allows it to be a little finer for the roots to kind of take hold in. So I like to sift my potting mix down to a 1/4 inch for my seed starting mix. And it also saves money too, because if you buy a bag of seed starting mix, you're gonna be paying a premium. Someone else is sifting it and someone else is marketing it as that. And so they're gonna charge a decent amount for it. You can buy a huge bag of potting mix for like $6 to $9, or you can buy a tiny little bag of seed starting mix for like $6 to $9. I'd prefer just to get a big bag of potting mix and do it myself. And also that way I can also add my soil amendments. To each gallon of seed starting mix, I've added 3 tablespoons of trifecta. That's kind of my fertilizer. The plants won't need it right away. A lot of you ask me this is, Luke, should I be fertilizing my plants right away? And the answer is you don't have to. Your seedlings, when they're first germinating, will not use fertilizer for the first 2 to 3 weeks or so until they get their first set of adult leaves. Once that happens, then they need some fertilizer. So they really use most of the nutrients within the seed coating itself until they get their first set of adult leaves. But that being said, I like to have it in the soil so that when they do need it, they can have it. It's just easier that way. So to each gallon, I've added 3 tablespoons of trifecta, and then I've also added just a couple tablespoons of worm castings per gallon as well. I didn't really measure, I just kind of threw some in there. And what that's going to do is it's going to give a lot of really good beneficial bacteria and fungi to the soil, kind of help inoculate it and get the plants off to a good start. And that's all I've done for my seed starting mix. I did pre-moisten it. That way it allows me to make my holes a little easier. And when I go to water, the water won't just beat up and run off. That's a big mistake I see a lot of people making, is they take their watering can, and when they water, they water from up above. First of all, you should really consider bottom watering. You don't have to. It really helps kind of reduce the amount of splashing and disruption. But if you do water overhead and your seed starting mix is dry, that soil just beads up and bubbles up, and it carries with it things like seeds or whatever, and it just kind of moves things around too much. So I like to pre-moisten it, kind of helps it stay stable, and then we're pretty much ready to start. I do have my 2 trays, my 2 go-to trays here. These are 5 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So these are 50 cell trays, and then I have 36 cell trays. So I like these 2 trays just because they're good size. These are my nursery flats, 50 cell nursery flats. They are 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. And then I have my 36 cell trays, which are 2 inches by 2 inches. I don't like to go a whole lot bigger than that on my trays, just because you don't really need to. I'm pretty much gonna be planting most of the stuff in the garden in the next 4 to 5 weeks or so. And this is plenty fine for 4 to 5 weeks worth of growth. Now, the final thing I was going to note is that in my nursery, my 50 cell nursery flats here, I'm going to be reserving those for things like peppers, tomatoes, kale, celery, herbs, things like that. I'm reserving my 36 cell trays, most of them, for things like asparagus and onions. And you'll see why later. But I've got my asparagus that I cold stratified. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. But we got incredible germination, you guys. Absolutely incredible germination. And so these are going to grow very fast, and I'm going to be planting about 2 or 3 plants per cell. So that's why having a little bit more space is going to be beneficial for my asparagus. And then my onions, we've talked about how we densely plant them, and then as they grow up, we can trim off the tops to kind of keep them from falling over prematurely. And then when it comes time to planting them outside, all we do is we simply take the root ball and we simply pull the plants apart. We separate them out very easily and then plant them in there with their respective spacing, so that we can conserve on the amount of space needed to start the onions that we need. So, because we're starting, 200 to 300 onions. If you gave each onion a cell, I mean, that'd be, this is 150 cells right here. So we literally would use up all of our space, all of our table space for just our onions, which is ridiculous, and you don't need to do that. So this really helps to kind of conserve space. Now, we are going to be designating 1 cell per plant with our 50 cell trays for things like peppers and tomatoes and whatnot, because they do need that space to grow, mature, and not compete for the space and the soil and the fertilizer and whatnot. So that being said, let's get planting. First up is the pasilla bajío. We've got jalapeno peppers, got those going. And I won't be able to show you all of the varieties I'm starting today because it just would take too long, but we're starting some peppers. I like to put it about a 1/4 inch deep. I really don't put them that deep, because if you plant your seeds too deep, they have a hard time coming up and they expel a lot of energy just sprouting. We got some Bequinho yellow faquijo pepper, or bird's beak pepper. And I'm also starting some extra plants for my father-in-law, who he doesn't really know how to start from seed yet, but he absolutely loves to grow Mexican chilies. So things like jalapenos and the pasilla bajío, he goes through a lot. And so I thought it'd be a good son-in-law just to plant him some. Now, a lot of you ask me, Luke, how many seeds do you plant per cell? With things like peppers and tomatoes, I will plant 1 to 2 seeds. There's really no reason to plant more than that. If you're confident with the germination rates of your seeds, you have high quality seed, you shouldn't need to plant more than 2. I'm fine planting 1 to 2 seeds, no problem, because I am confident. But you can always go back and thin. If you feel like if you have old seed and you want to use your old seed to save money, that's great. Old seeds still can germinate. The germination rate might just be less. So you might need to plant 3 or 4 seeds. Now, if 3 or 4 seeds sprout, great. That means you have good, viable seed. But you're going to want to come back and thin. So if you don't want to waste a precious plant, you got to kind of just give that wager. Give that a wager. Now we're planting some tomatoes. We're going to have a lot of paste tomatoes this year. And Mrs. MIgardener has made it a goal of ours to preserve a lot more tomatoes when it comes to things like sauce or tomato paste and pizza sauce, spaghetti sauce. We really come to realize that our food security is, well, not our food security, but our food supply is a lot more fragile than even we expected. Now, like I said, I'm not going to be able to start all these seeds on camera, but we are going to start things like celery. We're going to start things like cabbage, Brussels sprouts, sage, basil. We're starting some basils. We got kales. There's some kale in here. So there's lots of things we're going to be starting. But what else we got in here? More tomatoes, more kale, but lots of things that we are starting right now. Now, this is not everything. This is just the beginning. We're going to be also starting things like spinach outside, lettuce outside, well, adding to what we already planted. We're going to be planting things like carrots, radishes, beets. We're also going to start some beets inside, multi-sowing, so that we can move the plants outside when it's ready to move them outside. All right, so I'm really quickly going to show you how I plant my asparagus, because they're already started, and a lot of you asked me to show you how I transplant using like the paper towel method from cold stratified seed. So as you'll see, we've got all of our seeds there, looking absolutely beautiful. about near 95, 98% germination, which is incredible. And what we're going to do is we're going to just basically slide this out here. And then all we're going to do is simply take the plants off of the paper towel and move them into the soil. Like I said, I'm going to plant about 2 to 3 plants per cell here, just to really maximize my space. But super easy to do, really easy way to start seeds. So we're going to plant a lot of asparagus because I've always wanted to have a huge asparagus patch. And one of the things I'd like to do is to plant the asparagus underneath our fruit trees. One of my biggest takeaways from our Mexico trip was the use of an understory and just how beneficial it can be to plants that don't like a lot of sun, but also don't like really harsh conditions. Asparagus is kind of a finicky crop, and it really does like being planted in an understory if you've got it. It can handle partial shade, no problem. And so it was kind of one of my learning lessons from my trip is, man, I've got to use an understory crop a little more frequently. And so that's what we're going to do is we're basically going to start, I don't know, maybe 100 or so asparagus plants, and we're going to plant them underneath our fruit trees. All right, we'll plant one more little round of these here, and then we'll finish up with our onions. Our onions, like I said, we plant densely. We have got a couple videos on it, I think, where we basically just take the seeds, and you'll be shocked at how we plant, but it's so simple. We just take our finger, we press down the soil pretty much through the entire cell, sprinkle the seeds on without really much regard to spacing at all, and then we take the plants when it's time to plant and just pull them right apart. All right, check it out. Take your finger, press it down. This is going to ensure some really good soil contact with the seeds, just like that. And then we're going to take our seeds, start the Ailsa Craig. Just 2 cells, believe it or not, just 2 cells per variety. There we go. There's probably 20 or 30 seeds in there. Red Burgundy. It helps if you pat it down uniformly so the seed doesn't all roll to the middle. There we go. 20 or 30 seeds in there. White Sweet Spanish. Utah Yellow Sweet. And lastly, some Crystal White Wax. All right, and the final thing that we're doing is just come back here and just covering up the seeds by filling in those dibbles that we made. And so that's really the last thing that we have to do to get these seeds ready to sprout. Now I will say, not all seeds like to be in darkness. Yes, the vast majority do. I would say probably 98 to 99% of your seeds do like darkness, and some even require it to germinate. But when it comes to plants like celery, celery needs to be planted on the surface. So when it comes time to planting our celery, we're actually going to just surface sow them. And then that way, when they're kept damp, they're exposed to the sunlight and they'll germinate a lot better. I might even do a video on seeds that like sunlight to germinate. Let me know if you'd like to see that video. I'd be happy to film it, but I only like to film content that you guys are going to watch and enjoy. So I hope you guys did enjoy this episode. As always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you guys to grow big or go home, and we'll catch you all on the next video. All right, take care, guys. Bye.